All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here early on a Saturday morning. I'm sure many of you have other things to be doing, so I'm glad to see you all here. Today, going to be going over a few topics, and I think some of you might have seen me before. The way that my presentations work is that I like to be transparent and I like to be open. So it's not going to be just an hour and a half of me just talking. I'll pause periodically to allow for questions, and then there'll also be a Q&A at the end. And in addition to that, there will also be a couple of exercises that we'll do together during this session as well. And with that, I will go ahead and share my screen and introduce myself, and then we'll jump into it. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my screen. And also, if any of you are willing to turn your cameras on, I always like to see faces, but I'm not going to pressure any of you into doing that. So getting started, my name is Obioha Okereke. I go by Obi, and I went to the University of Washington Bothell, where I graduated in 2019. And then I currently work at a consulting firm based in Seattle, where I work as a Salesforce QA lead. And what that means is QA is quality assurance, and all that I do is I test stuff that is built within the Salesforce platform, and I have quite a bit of fun doing that. And I started College Money Habits about a year after I graduated from college in May of 2020, and I really kicked it off as a platform focused primarily on college students to teach them about financial literacy and budgeting and investing. And then it kind of grew into something that was for really just everyone and anyone who was willing to learn about personal finance. And then some fun facts about me. I've got a twin brother. And last year, I started doing Muay Thai, which is Thai kickboxing. But I've been pretty off and on about it. And I'm hoping to get a bit more consistent soon. And then for my financial journey, I started working when I was 18 years old. Working at Big Five Sporting Goods. Not sure if any of you are familiar with Big Five Sporting Goods. I'm sure some of you are. And then shortly after that, I started investing with $150. And when I was 22, I started my first kind of like big time job in consulting, where I was making a little bit over $80,000 a year. And then by age 25, which is where I'm at right now for the next month or so, I hit a net worth of $170,000. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar with net worth, what that means is it's essentially a calculation of your assets minus liabilities. So for me, it's my cash, investments, and my car that I own minus my loans, which for me would just be my student loans. All right, so now before we dive into any of the topics, going to do a pop quiz. Some of you, if you've experienced my presentations before, you'd be familiar with this, but really it's just gonna be, in this scenario, one pop culture question and then one financial literacy question. And this idea came from a video that I shot about 2 years ago with students from the University of Washington, where myself and some friends asked students just some fun questions and then ask them questions about financial literacy to see which topics they knew the most about. And so with that, I'm going to kick off the first question, and I'll ask if you can enter your answers into the chat. So first question, who is the musical artist who sings the famous song Billie Jean? Any other responses? Cool. Well, thank you, John. You are correct. Michael Jackson, the correct answer there. And then for the next question, this one's going to be centered around personal finance. What is the main difference between a high yield savings account and a regular savings account? So for this, you can feel free to type it or unmute, and any guesses are welcome. Any guesses? Okay. Thanks, John. All right, so the answer is with a high yield savings account, you will earn a higher interest rate, or APY, which is going to be your annual percentage yield. And then Jason, I see your question. The question was, what is the main difference between regular savings accounts and high yield savings accounts? And so the primary difference, again, is that with a high yield savings account, it's really in the name, you're going to earn greater yield, meaning that the money that you put into that saving account is going to earn more interest than it would in a regular savings account. And in some cases, this can be 20 times more than a regular savings account. And so I provided some examples, some real life examples. So I bank with Wells Fargo. The Wells Fargo regular savings account provides an APY of 0.15. And then for their platinum savings account, it's 0.25. And that increases to 1% if you've got $100,000 saved with them. However, with the Ally high yield savings account, which is a high yield savings account that I have, you'll earn 3% in interest on an annual basis. And so you can see that there's a very stark difference between a regular savings account and a high yield savings account. And why that's important to note is that for those of you who are thinking about really increasing the amount of money that you're saving or building up an emergency savings fund, a high yield savings account is a great way to go about doing that. All right, so now to get started, so we're going to be talking about setting goals, planning for retirement, and negotiating salary. And there'll also be some budgeting and saving tips sprinkled in there as well. Again, feel free to ask questions throughout, whether it's in the chat or when I pause, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you might have. So first, are you on track for retirement? So this is a big question. I'm sure many of you have asked yourselves this and been curious about if you're on track for retirement or not. And it really is going to depend on when you want to retire and the lifestyle that you want to live in retirement. But an interesting fact that I found is that 53% of households are currently at risk of not having enough money set aside to maintain their living standards in retirement. And so this is why it's important to think very critically about when you'd like to retire and determine if you're on track. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you have some ideas on things that you can start doing today to help get you on track for retirement and other steps you can take to identify how much you might need. So how much should you save for retirement? So Fidelity Investments suggests setting aside 15% of your pre-tax income. So what that means is if, let's say you earn $100,000 a year, then 15% of your income would be $15,000, meaning that every year you would want to save or set aside $15,000 towards your retirement savings or investments. And then let's say you earn $50,000, then it would be half of that amount. So $7,500 on an annual basis would be going towards your retirement. And this could be in the form of a 401k, so an employer-sponsored retirement plan, or it could be savings or personal investments. And then by age 30, you would want to have your annual salary saved. And this is going to be your gross salary, so before taxes. And then by age 40, you would have 2 times your salary. So using, let's say that you're earning $50,000 a year. By age 40, you would want to have $100,000 saved. And then age 50, that increases to 6 times. And by age 60, then it's 8 times, 67, it'll be 10 times. And essentially, as you're getting older and as you're getting closer to retirement, you'll want more and more saved so that by the time you hit your desired retirement age, you have enough money to keep you going throughout your retirement years. And then 55% of Americans, working Americans, feel they are behind on retirement savings. So currently, if you feel behind on your retirement savings, you are not alone. And shortly, we're going to go through some things that you can start doing today to help you start getting ahead with retirement savings. And hopefully, if you are concerned at all, help alleviate some of your concerns and give you some sense of a plan with planning for retirement. So similar, one thing that I saw within CNBC is that the average person expects that they'll need $1.25 million in retirement. However, when you look at average retirement savings, most folks aren't getting anywhere near that. Now, I'll be very clear that most of you probably won't need over $1 million to retire. That was a survey that was done to see how much people feel like they'll need. It doesn't necessarily indicate how much one will actually need in retirement, but you can see through the graphic that at most, for those between 65 and 74, they're going a bit above $400,000. And so this is why it's important, again, to evaluate how much you might need in retirement so that you can start saving and planning towards that goal. So figuring out how much you need. So one way to start is by figuring out your current cost of living. So your current cost of living would include expenses like how much are you spending on rent or your mortgage, food costs, clothing costs, bills, your phone bill, utilities, and things of that nature. And let's say that every year you need to spend $20,000 or let's say $30,000 in order to cover all of your expenses so that you can survive and live somewhat comfortably or in extreme comfort. That would be your current cost of living. That's the amount of money that you need to cover your expenses. And then thinking about retirement, asking yourself, is the lifestyle that you're living right now the same lifestyle that you'd want to live in retirement? And the answer could be yes. It could be no. Maybe in retirement you want to downsize, so maybe live in a smaller home or a smaller apartment, or maybe you want to move to a different state or a different country that has a cheaper cost of living. Or on the flip side, maybe you want to travel more and go to restaurants more. And maybe your lifestyle in retirement is going to be more expensive than the lifestyle that you're leading right now. In that case, you're going to have a higher cost of living in retirement, and so you'll want to plan for that. Additionally, you'll want to consider the age that you'll like to retire. And so how those all tie in together is if you look at the, let's say, average life expectancy of women in the US, it's about 77 years. And so rounding up to 80, let's say that you want to retire at age 60. You at minimum could assume that you'll spend 20 years in retirement. And so based off of that, you would want to make sure that you have enough set aside to deal with 20 years of your living expenses. And then naturally, the earlier you retire, the more years you'll spend in retirement, so the more money you'll want. And the later you retire, the less years you'll spend in retirement. And so potentially you might want less money depending on the lifestyle. And then another strategy, and we'll look at an example on the next slide, is the 4% rule. And the 4% rule dictates that in every year of retirement, you will withdraw 4% of your retirement savings. And it'll vary as the years go on. So it'll essentially be 4% multiplied by whatever inflation is. But in your first year of retirement, you would withdraw 4%. And then a simple equation for you all when you're thinking about goal setting and thinking about how much you might want in retirement, you can think of cost of living multiplied by years in retirement. And we'll look at an example on the next slide. But in a small scenario, let's say that you live off of $1,000 a year, which I imagine none of you do. And then you're going to spend 10 years in retirement. Your cost of living, 1,000 years in retirement, 10. And so 1 times 10 would be 10. So you would need $10,000. You could use that as an example, like $10,000 would be your goal to set aside to cover your retirement. But then you might want a little bit more to help with taxes, any medical expenses, or emergency expenses as well. And I'm going to pause right here to see if there's any questions thus far before we start looking at these examples. All good? Cool. All right, so some examples. So let's imagine that you have $500,000 set aside for retirement. So using that 4% rule, in your first year of retirement, you would withdraw $20,000. So that's going to be 4% of $500,000, and that is what you'll use to cover your expenses. And then in the second year of retirement, assuming a rate of inflation of 2%, then you would withdraw $20,400. And so that's taking that 4% and then multiplying by the rate of inflation. And so hopefully that that makes sense. And as the years go on, you'll basically adjust for inflation. So now, and I guess in the most recent years, inflation has been much higher than 2%. So you might multiply your however much you're planning to withdraw by 8% or 10% to keep up with the rising cost of goods and other things as well, rising cost of living. And then using the other method where you're taking the amount that your cost of living and then multiplying by the years in retirement, assuming that you want to retire at age 60 and spend 20 years in retirement and live off $30,000 a year, you would need $600,000, or you might set a goal of setting aside $600,000 to deal or to keep yourself going throughout retirement. And again, this is a simple way of looking at planning for retirement. It's really all to get you thinking about setting a specific goal for retirement. But again, thinking back to what's your current state of living right now, and how does that compare to how you want to be living in retirement, because that can let you know very quickly how much money you might need on a year-to-year basis to sustain your lifestyle throughout retirement. And I'll also add that some other questions to ask yourself when it comes to retirement would be like, do you plan to take care of others? So do you have a family that you're taking care of, or do you have grandkids that you might want to help out, whether it's setting aside money for their college funds or other things? And because those are all going to have an impact on how much you'll want throughout retirement. So to be asking yourself questions like that will help you out. So what can you do today? Start by setting a goal. So thinking again about how much you want, how much you need currently on a year-to-year basis, and how that compares to the lifestyle that you want to live in retirement. And then just setting a goal and evaluating if that goal is realistic. So let's say you set a goal of $500,000 and that you want to achieve retirement savings of $500,000 in the next 15 years. Then you would want to maybe start by dividing 500,000 by 15 and looking at how much your retirement savings would need to grow on a yearly basis for you to achieve that. And then asking yourself, is that realistic? If so, how might I go about doing that? Would that be a combination of investing and saving? Do I maybe need to be more aggressive with my investing? And things like that, because that'll really help guide you towards that goal. And next, you can open a high yield savings account and establish an emergency savings fund. So if nothing else from this presentation this morning, I want all of you to have a high yield savings account if you don't already, just because the way that it can aggressively change your savings is just amazing. I opened my high yield savings account about 2 years ago. And since then, I've been very surprised by the amount of interest that I'm earning. In addition to that, the bank that I use, Ally Bank, for my high yield savings allows you to set up saving buckets. So I have a bucket for emergency savings. I'm hoping to buy a house sometime soon, whether it's within the next year or 2 years. And so I have another bucket that's set aside for a down payment on a home. And then I also have another bucket that's related to car expenses. So if my car broke down or if I needed to fix a tire, I've got a bucket for that. And so that allows me to be very intentional about how I'm saving money. And then look for ways to increase income or cut expenses. So if any of you have side hustles, that's a way to increase your income, or asking for a raise, which we'll talk about very shortly. or switching jobs are all different methods that can be used to increase your income. And then for cutting expenses, that starts off really by taking a step back and looking at where your money is going right now, and seeing if there's any easy ways for you to cut back expenses, such as cutting back on subscription services that maybe you're not using, or cutting back on dining out, or maybe taking less vacations, and other sacrifices that can be made for you to increase savings, investing, and or pay off debt. And then investing is one thing you can also start to do today. So with investing, you can start with $1. You can start with $10, $100. It really doesn't matter. And if you remember from the beginning, I started off with $150. I've got friends and family that started off with less, friends and family that have started off with more. And some of you might have seen a quote before that says you can't save your way to retirement. With investing, it's one of the only ways where you can beat the rate of inflation. And so every year, your money is losing value due to inflation. And in a savings account, whether it's a high yield savings account or a regular savings account, your money is likely still going to be losing some value. However, with investing, it's one way where your money can actually outpace inflation and grow at a quicker rate than inflation. And so that's why it's important to invest, because the earlier you start, the more time you give your money to compound. But we'll talk about investing later on in this presentation. And then lastly, taking advantage of an employer-sponsored retirement plan, another topic that we'll cover later on. But what I mean by this really is that with a 401k, many employers will match some of your investments, meaning that up to a certain percentage of what you contribute, your employer will match that, essentially giving you free money towards your retirement savings. And I'll provide an example of that later on. All right, and any questions at this point? All right. Okay, and then just a refresher on budgeting. So one exercise that you all should go through on a regular basis, really whenever your living situation changes or your income changes or your expenses change, is to calculate your discretionary income. And your discretionary income is the amount of money that you have remaining after you've paid for taxes and after you've paid for all of your necessary expenses. So let's say, for example, you earn $4,000 every month after taxes. That would be, so your net income, $4,000 every month. And then let's say that your expenses in this situation, let's say your mortgage, food costs, and other bills amounts to $3,000. That would mean that the remaining amount of $1,000 would be your discretionary income. And so with that $1,000, it's important for you to know it, because then you can decide how much you want to set aside for saving, how much you want to set aside for investing, if you want to use a certain amount of that to pay off debt. And it allows you to then begin to think about setting strategic goals. So if you know at the end of every month, you have $1,000 at your discretion, you can say, okay, with that, I want to set up an automatic transfer of $300 that'll go directly into my saving or high yield savings account. And then with that remaining $700, it'll be my fund money or whatever it might be. Or you could say $300 is going to go towards saving, $200 is going to go towards investing, $500 I will budget amongst myself and use that to dine out or put towards a travel fund or pay off a credit card or things like that. But without knowing that number, it's very hard to be intentional about those things and know how much you can be setting aside. And you might find that maybe you have no discretionary income, and then this is where you'd want to go back and look at expenses that you might be able to trim down to give yourself a bit more breathing room. All right, so let's talk salary. So we have a poll that I am going to launch here. And it is really just asking you if you're satisfied with your current compensation. And it's completely anonymous. So nobody will know what you say, but hoping to see some answers with that poll. And I think it launches in the chat, Stephanie. Not sure if you know where that appears, but I believe it launches in the chat.
Yeah, it should just pop up on your screen.
Okay.
Just be able to select an answer right now.
So yeah, so I'll give some time to see some responses there, and then kind of talk through those. But yeah, all of you should see that poll on your screens. And does anybody not see it? Okay, and I'll give it 30 more seconds. All right, and 10 more seconds if anybody else wants to submit their responses. And again, it's completely anonymous. I can't see who's responding and who isn't. Cool. All right. So of the responses that I see, here's what we got. So majority said that they are satisfied with the compensation. And then it looks like it's even amongst those who would like to make a little bit more and those that feel underpaid. And so now going to talk a little bit about approaching salary conversations and also ways that you can look to see if you are being underpaid or kind of how your salary compares to others within your role. So a general kind of rule is that the best time to negotiate your salary is right after you receive an offer. So after you've gone through the interview process or after you've applied for a job, gone through the interview process, and then you're extended an offer because at that point in time, you're really in the best position because you've already demonstrated to them some qualities which have made them want to hire you. And so at that point, it really is the best time and when you have the most negotiating power. And today, you can look up industry expectations for your role. So let's say that you are a business development representative at Google. You could type in business development representative Google salaries. And then across the internet, there will be tons of different sites that will show you what that salary would be. Glassdoor is probably my favorite place to look because through Glassdoor, you're actually getting employees from companies who have submitted their salaries to the site. So for different roles, you'll actually see what people are currently making. So you can all do this with your current companies and see how you stack up, how your pay stacks up to that of your peers. And you can filter by years of experience. So you can see for your role with 0 years of experience, what's the average compensation for someone with 1 to 3 years of experience, someone with 4 to 6 years of experience. And so that's a very easy way of you to be able to check how you stack up. And then there's plenty of other sites as well where you can look up different salary averages and salary expectations, and also projected kind of growth rates of respective industries as well. And now for those of you who are considering asking for a raise, things for you to do would be to list all of your work-related accomplishments from the past 6 months. So reflecting whether it's on the past 6 months or the past year, especially right now, some of you might be coming up on annual reviews in the new year. To think back to what have you accomplished over the year, what are your job responsibilities and how have you performed against them? And then also to research competitive salaries for your position. So looking at the company that you currently work for, and then also looking at competitors to see what are they paying their employees who are in similar positions to you, to see how your pay stacks up. And then asking yourself, why do you want to raise? So this is important because it can help you with determining how much you want to ask for. So let's say that you have overperformed and you have data to show that, where you had certain things that you were asked to do and you did those and you did them better than expected and you received positive feedback from other people that you work with. And if you did receive any constructive feedback, you also have evidence to show that you took that and improved in how you deliver your work. So that would be a merit-based raise. You might ask for more. And it's really going to depend on your industry, but this could be anywhere from like 10 to 20%. But that's not a hard and fast rule. But that's compared with, let's say you want to raise for external reasons, like a rising cost in living, or you're suddenly unable to afford, I guess, rent. Same situation. And then kind of how inflation has been rising. Let's say that you want to raise for those reasons, then you might ask for a bit less. So that might be around 3 to 4% to keep up with inflation. And so those are a couple or a few ways to think about raises for myself. I have actually been kind of in conversations with my manager around this that started at the beginning of the year. And so you can see that second to last bullet is to approach your manager ahead of time, because it's best to not attempt to negotiate right after you go through a review, because at that point it might be too late, because at that point they might have already made a decision. And so what I did at the beginning of the year is I told my manager, I want to be at this level with my salary. Now, first, is that realistic? And then if so, how do we get there? Like what steps do I need to take in order to get there? And so she didn't laugh me out of the room. And so I knew that the salary was realistic, which helped me. And then we walked through some things that I needed to do in order to put me in the best position to achieve my compensation goals. And so we more or less laid out a plan. And the reason that this is important is because it let me know what exactly I needed to do based on that conversation. And then throughout the year, I've checked in with her and said, like, okay, how am I doing? Do you have any constructive feedback for me at this point in time? Especially as we are approaching the end of the year, because I have my review next month. And it's helped me because currently of what we laid out, there's one thing that I have not completed yet. And then one thing that's also that's in progress. And so I know, okay, if I don't complete these things, then kind of the top end of that range that I provided is probably going to be unrealistic. And I will understand why that is, because we already laid out a plan that kind of showed everything, and I didn't do everything that was there to kind of overachieve, if that makes sense. And then when it comes to conversations around compensation, always be realistic and be confident. So another thing that I emphasize with my manager is I want to be realistic. Like I want to know if what I'm saying is like insane, if it's too much, if it's unrealistic for this particular company, because that lets me like stay grounded in what I'm asking for, and also the responsibilities that would come with kind of any promotions and also just allowed me to level set with what I've actually accomplished, because what you've actually accomplished and what you think you've accomplished might not always align. Any questions about this topic or anything that I've mentioned around compensation or any of the preceding topics? Thanks, Jason. Cool. All right. So with that, I wanted to do a little exercise with all of you, and Stephanie, if it's possible to do. Oh, one moment. Allison, you have a question? I see a raised hand. Allison, did you have something you wanted to ask? Or was that on accident? Okay, so I'll move forward, but wanted to do an exercise with you all. In small groups, hoping to have you all think about this question statement, where, like, imagining you are a senior student in college, if you had to pick between following your passion or a career that paid more, what would you do? And these obviously are not always mutually exclusive. It's a question that I recently asked students at the University of Washington to see where their thoughts were. It's a situation that I had to deal with when I was graduating from college. And so I thought it would be interesting to get some of your perspectives as you maybe think back or think about where you're at currently. And if you had an opportunity to do either or, even now, what you'd go with. Well, hopefully you all had a moment to chat amongst yourselves about what you would do if you were a senior student in college facing this decision, or even now in your current lives, if you're facing this decision, excuse me, what you would rather do. Hoping to hear from anyone that wants to share. If any of you had an opinion on this, curious if anybody just wants to share if they would have picked passion or if they would have picked the other career that paid more. So feel free to unmute yourself and say what you would have picked, or if you want to use the chat to indicate which option you would have gone with. So is anybody willing to share which option they would have gone with or would go with now, knowing what you know now? Okay, cool. And Jason, thanks for sharing. You'd go with your passion. So when I asked this question to students at the University of Washington, it was somewhat of an even, okay, and then Ashley Manson, thank you all for that. So when I asked this question at the University of Washington, it was a pretty even split amongst those who would go with their passion and others who would go with their career. And some of the reasonings for it, behind picking your passion, was that, like, if I, speaking from their perspectives, if I can get paid to do what I love to do, that's a win for me. And $60K would be enough to survive and cover my expenses, and that would be enough, versus being stuck in a role which I did not enjoy simply because it paid more money. So that was one of the more kind of like popular explanations. And then for those that picked the other career, a lot of them said, so assuming that I am living in Seattle, where of course we have a higher cost of living, I would rather stick it out in a career, whether it's for a couple years or a few years, to build some savings and allow myself to be comfortable, and then potentially look to switch at a later date. And for myself, so I had a similar situation when I was graduating from college. So I went to school to study finance, and the hope for myself was to go into wealth management. And by the time that I had graduated, I had a couple of offers to go work within wealth management. And then I also had one offer from a consulting firm to go work in consulting. And then for wealth management, the offers were in the ballpark of $60,000. So two of them were going to be around 60K, almost exactly. And then the offer to work in consulting, which I think you all know, I selected based on the second slide, was for $82,500. And then I made a decision to go with what paid more. But that was for a couple reasons. One of those was because I knew that with consulting, it wouldn't be as stressful as wealth management early on, just because I knew more was going to be asked of me within wealth management. And then I also just knew with more money would come more flexibility. And I do not regret my decision, because it's allowed me to save pretty aggressively early on in my life, and also focusing on my investments. And today, a lot of what I have is because of that decision I made, along with other decisions like focusing on saving and not spending all the money that I'm making. But there is no right or wrong answer. I just thought it would be an interesting question to get some opinions on. And I can see that a few of you have selected the other career. Many of you have selected passion. And I don't know if any of you faced similar decisions when you were graduating from college, or if you didn't go to college when you were at any point in your life, if you've ever had kind of this decision where you had an option to pursue something that you wanted to do for, let's say, many years, or to go down a different road that paid more money, how that played out for you, and if, like, looking back, you regret your decision and wish you would have done something differently. But yeah, no, thank you all for contributing to that exercise. So now we are going to take a break, and suppose we can connect back at 11 o'clock, and we'll start promptly at 11. Actually, let's do 10:58. Take a 5, or no, well, let's do 11. And so let's just take a little bit of a break. During that break, feel free to find a pencil and a paper, because we've got another exercise. And then also, feel free to follow College Money Habits on Instagram. So that's my Instagram page, where I share somewhat daily, if not daily, then weekly tips, and also just the different things that are going on in my personal finance journey. So it's a great resource for many of you for some quick information. Yeah, I will see you all at 11 o'clock. All right, welcome back from your break. We are going to keep on pushing forward. So next, we are going to talk about goal setting, and then we'll talk a little bit about budgeting and saving again before hopping into investing and closing out with our Q&A. So for setting goals, what are your financial goals? So this was a question that was asked within a poll, and so sharing some answers that I saw. So saving money for short-term and long-term care, passing money on to children, and then making more profit. And when it comes to the importance of setting goals, so goals keep you grounded. They give you something to work towards, and they are a critical step with establishing financial independence and financial security. And really, if you're not working towards a goal, it's very hard to be intentional about how much you're saving or how much you're investing, or to really have kind of some direction when it comes to your finances. So we're going to go through kind of a goal setting exercise here in a moment. So hopefully you all grab the pencil and paper, or you have a computer where you can kind of write something out in your notes. But it also, lastly, I'd say it gives you something to measure and something to celebrate. So if you have a goal, let's say, of saving $1,000, and then you determine that it's going to take you 4 months to hit that goal, and then let's say you hit it in three months for because you saved more than you anticipated, or maybe your investments allowed you to grow your savings or your wealth at a quicker rate, then it just gives you something to celebrate, whether you achieve it in a quicker amount of time or the amount of time that was expected, or maybe it takes a bit longer. You've still gone about achieving something, and it's great to take a step back and maybe throw yourself a party or go on vacation, or whatever it may be. I have a friend who set a goal of paying off all of his student loans. And he determined that it was going to take him, I think, about a little bit over a year to do that. He actually ended up hitting his goal a bit earlier than expected, due to some decisions he made, such as living at home and then also not hanging out with friends like me very often, and just focusing really on saving his money. And so he was able to hit that goal early. And then when he did that, he ended up buying himself a gift. And so as you're going about these goals, making sure that you're staying grounded as you go about achieving them, but also making sure to take a step back and pat yourself on the back as well. And it also helps to find an accountability buddy, whether that's a friend or a family member as well, to help keep you on track. So using one of the examples before, we're going to kind of walk through how you can make your goals measurable and ask yourself if they are realistic or not. One of the goals that was mentioned previously is, one of you mentioned, I would like to save money for short-term and long-term care. So that's what you would like to achieve. And so now thinking about when you would like to achieve it. And again, this is just an example. Modifying that goal to say by May of 2023, I would like to set up an emergency fund to cover 6 months of expenses, which would be your short-term care, and then begin building my retirement portfolio. And now thinking about how you can make that goal measurable, modifying it to say, I would like to set up an emergency fund of $20,000 by May of 2023 and have retirement savings of $30,000 by the end of 2023 across savings and investments. I will accomplish this goal, or I'll accomplish this by setting aside $1,000 a month for savings and $500 a month for investments. And so you can see how we took this goal of setting aside money for short-term and long-term care to now there's some action items behind it, where in order to set up a certain amount of money to cover the short-term care and also to begin building wealth through your retirement savings and retirement investments, you are going to go about setting aside $1,000 a month for savings, $500 a month for investments. And so now you know that every month where you don't do this, so let's say you save less money or you set aside less for retirement, you're either going to have to make that up in a different month, or you're going to have to look at pushing your goals back. And then on the flip side, if you save more, if you invest more, let's say the stock market does better than anticipated, or you earn more money and interest in your savings account, then you might hit these goals sooner. But regardless, having it laid out like this gives you kind of a deadline, not really a deadline, but a goal, an end date, and then also items that you can track. And so as you're setting goals, it's great to do this and kind of go through this exercise so that you can set up, actionable goals that aren't going to be too general, that they're hard to track. And then lastly, you'll want to ask yourself, is your goal realistic? So if you determine in order to hit a goal that you're going to need to save, using this example, $1,000 a month for savings, asking yourself, okay, is that something that I can do? So going back to your discretionary income, is it possible for you to save $1,000? If not, then you might look at, okay, well, if I can't, and let's say I can only save $500 a month and I can only set aside $100 for investments. What does that do to your goal? Does that mean that you have to push it back to December or maybe into the next year? And so that's why it's important to, again, set these actionable goals and then work backwards to see what is possible and what isn't. And now for exercise. So using whether you got a pen, pencil, or you got a computer, just want to take 4 minutes to write down a goal or two. You don't have to do 2 goals. It could just be one short-term goal or it could be a long-term goal. However, feel free to write down one of each. And then thinking back to like, what is your goal? How can you make it measurable? So if the what is, I want to save more money, maybe I want to save $5,000 by this date. And then thinking, how can you, like, what do you need in order to do that? So looking at how much savings do you have right now? And in order to hit that, how much time do you have? So if you want to save, to hit that $5,000 goal, if you need to save $2,000 in the next 5 months, is that a realistic goal for you? And in order to do that, how much do you need to set aside every single month? So start by writing out a goal, when you would like to achieve that goal, and then thinking through what can you do now to go about achieving that, what risks exist. So of course, there's always going to be risks that might take you away from your goal. So recognizing those, and so making sure it's, again, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And so there's another example similar to the one before, that's there at the bottom of the screen. But I will be silent now and let you all think and write in peace for the next 2 minutes. Okay, so it's been 4 minutes total. So are there any questions? I'm not going to ask any of you to share, but I just want to see if there's any questions when it comes to goal setting or thinking about how to write out your goals and think through setting measurable goals. And I'll add that it's one thing that's helped me throughout my life, because I still have a piece of paper from when I was in high school. I think it was high school or it was like first year of college, where I wrote down that I wanted to save $1,000. And then on that piece of paper, I'd also written down how much money I had at the time and how much I was able to save every month based on my level of income there. And I like looking back at it periodically because it lets me know kind of like how far I've come since then. And so that's why sometimes it can be fun to write down your goals, because then, who knows, 6 months from now, you might look back and say, wow, like I've come a very long way since setting that goal. If there's no questions, we'll keep trucking along. So we've already kind of talked about high yield savings accounts. I just wanted to provide some budgeting apps as well that might help some of you out. So if you have a smartphone or if you have a laptop, these are all applications that you can use. I currently use Mint, which lets me track my expenses and also track my income. And it's nice because I can simply just open up the app and then it will show me, like for the month of November, it totals up all my expenses and then it breaks it out. So I can see for food, how much money did I spend? For rideshare, how much did I spend? And on these various categories, I can look at how much I spent, and I can also look back at other months throughout the year to see how have my expenses changed. Have they increased in certain areas, decreased in certain areas? Am I going over budget? Am I under budget? And that lets me know if there's any trends. So for instance, I might find that I'm overspending on food, which I do pretty much on a month-to-month basis. But in the past, when I looked at that and I saw that I was overspending on food, I made an adjustment to start cooking more. And that actually helped me cut back on my spending for quite some time. Really, it was like over the course of a year, I cut back on my spending on food, with the exception of travel, and allowed me to redirect money into my savings account. And then with emergency savings, talked about that a little bit earlier as well. Emergency savings is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And so your living expenses will be your mortgage, rent, food, utilities, things of that nature, anything that you need in order to survive. And let's say that your expenses amount to $2,000 a month. For your emergency savings, you would want to have $6,000 to $12,000 based on 3 to 6 months of expenses. And the purpose of that is in the event of any emergencies or you have sudden job loss, you've got money that's already been set aside to deal with those unexpected emergencies. So it's your way of planning for surprises. And in doing so, it helps you stick to your budget and not blow up your finances when these emergencies eventually occur. So to kind of recap, set goals, track your spending. So figuring out what method works for you. And then automating your savings is a great way to go about it as well. So I currently have automation set up. So every month, a certain amount gets swept out of my checking account into my high yield savings account. And this helps me prioritize saving because it makes saving an expense. And what I mean by that is that I know every month that $2,000, that's what my automation is going to come out of my checking account and go into my savings account. So I know I'm going to need that amount of money in my account. So it lets me not overspend, because if the money's not there, I don't actually know what happens. And I don't want to have my my account go into overdraft. And so I'm always making sure, okay, I'm going to start my budget basically after saving. I'm not going to spend and then save whatever is remaining. And then don't give into impulse purchases. So that really just goes into delayed gratification, where it's making sure that whenever faced with a purchasing decision, you're asking yourself, is this something that I need to do now? Is this something I can do in the future? Because having enough money to do something and being able to afford to do it doesn't always mean that it's the right decision. And so asking yourself, just because I can do this doesn't, or telling yourself rather, that just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something, because it might take you away from your goals, is kind of a level of self-discipline and delayed gratification that's going to pay off to like very high levels as you navigate through your financial journey. So for our final topic, we're going to talk a little bit about investing. So when it comes to investing, you should always start by thinking about how much you want to invest. And before you start investing, you'll want to set up an emergency savings fund. And the reason for that is because with investing, you can lose money. So the market does not always go up. If any of you have been following the market recently, it's been very volatile. And so for most people, they've lost money over the past year or so, with a large part of that being due to the fact that tech stocks are down, and then also inflation hasn't helped much as well. So just keeping that in mind, that there is an element of risk, and so it's important to have savings set aside. So in the event that your investments go down, you can still maintain your lifestyle and cover your bills. You don't want to invest your savings. You want to keep savings and investments separate. So thinking through how much you want to start with, for me, that was 150, just because that's what I could afford. And if I had lost that 150, it wouldn't have forced me to change my lifestyle. And then understanding your investment options, I'll briefly go over those in a moment, or some of those in a moment, and then picking a strategy and deciding a platform. So there's several platforms, tons of platforms out there that allow you to invest on your own, where you're going to be picking stocks or mutual funds or ETFs on your own at your own discretion, and you'll be buying and selling those. Or you can use a robo-advisor, which is essentially an advisor online that'll do the investing for you. And so there's apps that allow for that. Or you can hire a financial advisor to make those decisions on your behalf. So investments you should know about. So there's stocks. Stocks will be, if you think about companies like Coca-Cola, Boeing, Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, these are all companies where you have the ability to buy shares of stock in those companies, which represent ownership in those companies. So let's say, for example, let's say Jason buys one share of Amazon, and that is all he owns. So Jason's portfolio is that one share of Amazon. Now that is ownership of one share of stock. Now, instead, if Jason were to purchase a mutual fund, that would be buying into hundreds or thousands of stocks at the same time. So a mutual fund is comprised of hundreds of thousands of companies. And the advantage of a mutual fund is that by investing in multiple companies at the same time, you're getting diversification. So in the event that a company, let's say the stock becomes worthless, your investment doesn't become worthless. So using that example, if you were to purchase the one share of Amazon stock and then Amazon suddenly just went out of business, your portfolio, the value of your portfolio would go to zero. However, if you purchased a mutual fund that held Amazon in addition to other stocks like Microsoft, Apple, Boeing, Home Depot, if Amazon went to zero, your investment would not go to zero because you have ownership in other companies. So hopefully that makes sense. Mutual funds tend to be a great way for new investors, even seasoned investors, to invest in the long term. And with ETFs, those are exchange traded funds. They'll be structured similar to mutual funds. So to put it in the simplest of terms, mutual funds and ETFs are a great way to diversify your portfolio and to start out investing. I'm going to throw a couple ETFs in the chat that you all can research. I won't say which ones I own, but they're a great way to go about investing. Stocks, similarly, can be a great way of investing as well. Just keeping in mind that when you do so, you might be taking on a greater level of risk just because you're taking on ownership in one company as opposed to several companies. And in my personal investments, I have all three of these. So I've got stocks, I've got mutual funds, and I have ETFs as well. And with where you can start investing, so you've got employer 401ks. So if you don't know if your employer offers a 401k, you should ask. And then there's also Roth IRAs. Roth IRAs are tax-free investment accounts. So if you currently receive a W-2, you can open a Roth IRA. And with a Roth IRA, you are investing with post-tax income. So the money that you receive when you get your paychecks is money that can all be invested in a Roth IRA. There are limits to a Roth IRA. I believe it caps out at $6,000 or $6,500 a year. But any money that you earn there is tax-free if you have the account for at least 5 years. And there's also some other criteria that I suggest looking into. But it's nice because let's say you open one now, and then in 20 years, your Roth IRA has grown to $1 million. That is tax-free. And so great, it's a great way to go about investing, keeping in mind that a Roth IRA is an account, it's not an investment. So if you open a Roth IRA, it's just an account where you will then have to purchase investments using the money that you funded that account with. And then a self-managed brokerage would be, if any of you have heard of Robinhood or like Charles Schwab, Fidelity, if you open an account at those locations, you likely will have the option of really just managing your own investments. So I have a Robinhood account where I can just buy and sell whatever, and that is self-managed, as opposed to a managed account, which is where you would have a financial advisor or robo-advisor. So there's platforms like Wealthfront or Betterment, where you can invest, let's say $500 or $1,000, and then that'll be put into different portfolios. And I believe they're going to be ETF or mutual fund portfolios based on a risk tolerance that you have provided. And then going back to 401ks, so this graphic here is an example. And I wanted to call it out simply because if you look in the middle there, it might be a little bit small, but in that section where it says contributions, you can see what I meant earlier by a company match. So in this example, you can see that the contributions for this 401k account, a little bit above $11,000. And then for the employer, they contributed $4,367. And what that means is that for this individual, of what they contributed, the employer also matched a percentage. So it took that total contribution from $11.6 thousand up to about $16,000. So if any of you have a 401k, highly recommend contributing up to the match. And usually your employer will clearly state what that match is. It might be 3%, it might be 4%. but you'll want to at least do the minimum of the match. And then and I know that we're nearing time here, so I'm trying to breeze through before we get to that Q&A. Common mistakes to avoid would be not creating a strategy. And then chasing trends and hype stocks. So it's great to watch the news. It's great to read online as well, but make sure that you are going to multiple resources to get your information, and that you're also using some thought before making decisions. So not, let's say that you see something that says invest in this to double your money. That would be a good example of something that you probably shouldn't invest in, just because anything where you can double your money in a short amount of time is going to be something where you're taking on heightened levels of risk, which inherently means that you could be losing very large sums of money as well. And then, so doing enough research. One of my favorite resources would be Investopedia when it comes to any kind of investing guidance or to learn about investing terms. And I'm going to type that into the chat. And so, yeah, those are kind of the big things that I would look out for. And then why you should start investing. So I spoke about this at the beginning. It allows you to outpace inflation. So it allows your money to grow at a quicker rate than it's losing value. It'll also help you reach your financial goals. So for me, I had a goal a couple years ago about where I wanted to save $100,000. And I determined that it was going to take me 2 years to do this. I ended up hitting it. It was in about a year and a half. And that was solely because of investing. Because the rate that I was investing and the rate that my investment grew was more than I anticipated. And so I was able to actually grow my money much quicker than I anticipated. And it is the best way, in my opinion, so it may not be a fact, to save for retirement. Again, for that reason of it's going to grow at a quicker rate than is possible with saving money. But also keeping in mind that there is risk associated with it. And then with compounding interest, that's really just, let's say that you invest $100 and then you earn 10% on that $100. It is now $110. And then in the next year, if you earn 10%, you would now earn a larger sum. And so I think it'd become $121 as opposed to earning $10 again. You're going to be earning 10% of whatever the value of your portfolio is. So as your portfolio grows larger and larger and larger, the amount that you're earning proportion to that is going to grow larger and larger and larger. And so there's this snowball effect. So the earlier you start with investing, the better. And so some resources for all of you to check out would be the Bird Bar Place financial page, where you can learn about budgeting, credit, investing, delayed gratification, and really kind of anything under the sun when it comes to personal finance. And then my personal website, College Money Habits, where similarly you can learn about investing, budgeting, and there's also a blog there as well where you can read some stories. And then NerdWallet, MarketWatch, Investopedia are all resources that I use for my own research. And then NerdWallet has a budgeting tool that you all can use. And I'm gonna flip back to that so you all can see it. But if any of you want to connect with me, my email is there, and Stephanie has my email if any of you are hoping to reach out to me as well. You can also follow my page on Instagram or connect with me on LinkedIn. And with that, we will go into the Q&A. While we're doing that, I'll leave this list of resources up on the screen. But yeah, no, I'm happy to answer any questions any of you have in the time remaining, if there are any questions. And so you can feel free to unmute yourselves or type in the chat if you've got questions about investing, budgeting, planning for retirement. Yep, not seeing any questions. Not hearing anything yet. So also just some things that I would add. would be to, if you haven't already, to do research regarding places where you can start investing if you're interested in starting to invest, because there's going to be tons of platforms like Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, where you can get started. And excuse me for a moment. And then with saving, opening a high yield savings account. So NerdWallet has a resource where they publish monthly articles on some of the best high yield savings accounts. So if you were to go to Google right now and type in high yield savings accounts or best high yield savings accounts NerdWallet, then NerdWallet should show up along with some articles that are going to show you different savings accounts, their interest rates, and then if they have any minimum deposits required. And so, Jason, I see in the chat that you mentioned that you're hoping that you can save more. For any of you that are hoping to save more, I would start by setting a goal. So figuring out how much money do you want to save, and you might set that goal around your emergency savings fund. So if you don't have an emergency savings fund set up already, thinking back to, okay, how much money do you need personally every month to cover all of your expenses? And then off of that amount, multiply it by 3 just to start out with. And that would be your kind of your starter emergency fund. Alternatively, you could use $1,000. So if you maybe don't have $1,000 saved yet, set a goal of saving $1,000. Otherwise, I would start with that 3 months worth of living expenses. And let's just say that's $7,000. Then you might have a goal of, I want to save $7,000. And then go back to your discretionary income and seeing how much money at the end of every month do you have left over. Because that'll let you know how much money you can save. And then look at how much money you can save, how much money you currently have, and see what the difference is between that goal. And then that way you can start to become actionable and say, okay, like if I can save $100 every month, I'm going to save $100 every month towards that goal of saving $7,000. And it's going to take me this long. And then that way you can set a goal of, I'm going to save $7,000 by this date. And then to do so, I'm going to save $100 every month. And so thinking back to that goal setting exercise and setting measurable goals will help you out and open a high yield savings account. And with that, I think we are at time here. If there's no questions or no additional thoughts, but yeah, I'm happy to answer if anybody has any last minute questions. Otherwise, we can close out. Cool. Yeah, thank you all for attending. Thank you all for being here this Saturday morning, and I hope you all have a fantastic weekend and are able to relax and do something fun.